All right, welcome back. We are Game 2014. That's Mobile Game Development 1, and it's Week 2, Part 2 of our broadcast. And now we're talking about Unity and GitHub. So let's do a couple things. So first of all, one of the challenges we have whenever we use Unity is making a good Git Ignore file. And I want to talk about this in a second. So one thing to do is we can use a trick. So if I go up online, and if I go to George Brown here, I'm going to talk about this. So this is our GitHub organization. So there's a couple tricks to make this happen. GitHub has a default Unity Git Ignore file. And we're going to talk about this in a second, and I'll show you the differences between one and the other. I'm going to be talking about a couple things. One, how to put things on Unity, on GitHub, what to put on GitHub, what not to put on GitHub, what to zip, how to zip, all that kind of stuff, because there's some stuff that I've asked you to do for your assignment, assignment 1 that requires GitHub. So first thing, what we can do is to cheat, and I say this in a good way, if I click New in my GitHub repo, and let's suppose I create a test repo for a second. Let's call it test, right? And we don't care about, it can be private for now, because I don't care about actually ever connecting to this thing. But what I want to do is add a Git Ignore file. All right. So what GitHub does for us, instead of searching it out on the web, is it provides a bunch of different Git Ignore files. So one of them is for Unity. So please go down here and choose Unity. Again, to complete your Lab 1, by the way, Lab 1 is active. If you look at your assignments folder, there is a Lab 1. It's called Unity and GitHub, just like this video, and it's due Friday, September 18th. It's this Friday at midnight. And the instructions on using the example in class, or you can use another GitHub, a Unity project if you're working on one with Joss, or if you had one from last week, which is what I'm going to do. Any Unity project will do. And then all we need to do is add the appropriate Git Ignore files, so that way it would ignore at least the library folder and other folders, so that they don't get pushed up on GitHub. Because the library folder, my friends, is very large. Okay, so a Git Ignore file is like required for Unity, and we'll talk about how to use it in a sec. Okay, so first of all, let's get back to this. So I make a new repository. I'm going to call it test. I'm adding a Git Ignore file. It's of type Unity, and I'm clicking create repository. So instead of searching around, GitHub actually provides you one. Okay, here it is. Now I can't use this repository because I have a Git Ignore file. I'd have to merge my Git Ignore file with my current repository on Unity. So the best thing to do is just use this as a template. In fact, you can actually leave this up here as an example. Call it the Unity Git Ignore project as an example. And you can always use this default basic Git Ignore anytime you want. Remember what Git Ignore does? It ignores any files or folders that are listed in it. So example, in this case, it'll be ignoring and I'm just going to make this bigger for you guys to see. It'll ignore the library folder as an example, which has the most, kind of the largest volume. For example, if you download anything from the asset store, it gets stored, references of it get stored in the library folder. And if you build anything, for example, we had a couple builds last time for Android, it gets stored typically in some kind of builds folder or other folder of your choice. You can actually add to this Git Ignore file as well, right? The builds folder can be something like, at minimum, 30 megabytes, 50 megabytes, 60 megabytes. Your library file can balloon to gigabytes if you're not careful, if you download enough assets. So we don't need all those things up on GitHub. All I would need from you is your project without those two folders. Okay, so instead of you doing it manually and putting it up on GitHub, there's a nice Git Ignore file that you can use, and it also ignores other files that are not required. Okay, now there's some issues with this. Sometimes what we want to do is for the OBJ folders or anything with OBJ in them, we also use objects, for example, OBJ files. If we want to use Blender as an example to create assets, sometimes they create, OBJ format as an example instead of FBX, because OBJ creates almost like a very simple format that gives you vertice data. And if you include that in your Unity project as a mesh, and if you use this Git Ignore, right? What'll happen is all your meshes won't be, added to your GitHub, and that's bad. So sometimes what I do is I take this out, I comment this out with a hashtag. That's what I do. In our case, we're making a 2D game, so I'm not expecting that we're going to have any 3D meshes. So chances are it's okay for us to include this in the Git Ignore file. All right, let's continue. So now that I have this file, I want to go to my Unity Hub. So I want to find my project. So let's say here's my Unity Hub project. I'm bringing up Unity Hub, and I have your lab 1 from last week. This is what this one was. I'm going to go into the ellipses here on the right, and I'm going to open it up, right? Show and Explorer. It's going to show me the containing folder, the thing that contains this project, right? I'm going to be using command line for my Git and GitHub this semester, but however, you can use whatever tool you want. And recommended tools that we talked about before in past semesters were Sourcetree, GitKraken, GitHub Desktop, and others. Okay, and if you want a full list of those, I can provide them for you if you need it. Okay, but I'm going to be using command line. In order for you to make command line work on a Windows machine, you have to download the tools from here, git-scm.com, and follow the installation instructions. Sometimes you'll also have to monkey with your environment variables in order for you to make it work. But what you want at the end is if I pull up a command line and if I type in the word git and then -- version, I should be able to get a version of Git that's compatible with Windows. Notice my version is 2.27, and that's totally fine to do. You can make that one version earlier, it's okay. But they have a newer one in Windows. Mac and Linux users won't have this problem, right? And the reason for this is because Mac and Windows users have Git built into their terminals, all right? And there's a version of Git that they have for each of your distributions. Can we just use our assignment repo as our lab root? Sure. I'm totally fine with that, Lawrence. If you're going to use that later on and you're preemptively giving me your link for this lab, yes, absolutely. Why not? Right? If you're ready to do that. So that it's kind of killing two birds with one stone for me. Because I want to be able to see the same, I want to see your repositories anyway. So this is what the essence of this whole project is, to get you guys understanding how to use GitHub with Unity.
Tom?
Yes?
I tried using the Git version just on my command prompt as well, but it doesn't have it as a recognized command.
Right, so you have to download it here. Do you want me to show you how to do it?
Oh.
Yeah, so if you're using Windows, you'd have to go to git-scm.com. Let me just put this as a link inside of our path. I'll definitely show you how to do it if you want to. It won't be that many steps either.
I was going to do it with the Git desktop instead, but I just wanted to see with the command prompt.
I'll do it with you. I'll install it. But yes, you can certainly use Git desktop. But what I'll do is under our weekly content, I'll put inside week 2, I'll add in a link, right? Oh, and I didn't share my YouTube link for this one, which is probably what I should do. Let's do that now. So first I'll do a web link, and I'll say that git-scm is Git installation link. Okay, so that's what this is. And let's, since we're here, and I totally forgot to do this, and people are going to get mad at me, let me copy my stuff for my video so you guys can, some of you may have to watch it live. So I just want to make it available to you guys live now. And you can totally do that. And the great thing about this is you can always zoom back, and if you miss something, you can go back and watch it again, and like that. There we go. I'll put this link up here. There we go. Cool. So there's lesson 2 part 1 and lesson 2 part 2 on YouTube. All right. So if I'm going to do it, if I'm going to install things, here's the install sequence. Okay. By the way, if I'm going to install GitHub for the very first time again, I should not have a command prompt open. Please do not have a command prompt open when you follow these steps, if you do. And this process that I'm showing you is only for Windows. Mac and Linux users would have a different installation process if you wanted to upgrade to the latest version of GitHub, which you probably don't need to do. So let's close this off and click on download for GitHub, right? So I'm going to put this in my downloads, and it's a quick download, 48 megs or so. Again, make sure you have everything closed. And then I'm going to launch GitHub, the installation for Git, I mean. It's going to bring up this, and it says only show new options. I'm going to uncheck this and click next. So here are the options. It says additional icons on the desktop. Yes. Git bash here. Yes. Git UI. Yes. Git large file support. Yes. I want to do that for sure, especially for Unity. Use TrueType fonts, and then check daily for Git Windows updates. No, I don't want to check daily. Next, I want to use Visual Studio Code as my default installer of choice. I don't want to use Notepad++. That's just me. You may decide to use Visual Studio Code or something else. Atom is also a good choice. Sublime Text as another default. But I want to use Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to click Next. My Visual Studio Code is installed. If you want to use Visual Studio Code, you can use it for both the Unity as well, and you can get the install for Visual Studio Code here. If you type in Visual Studio Code, I think it's a pretty good editor for using for Unity, as opposed to using Visual Studio 2019. You don't have to use that big IDE, although it's pretty good in terms of an experience. However, if you're on a Mac, this is your best friend. Visual Studio Code on a Mac or a Linux machine for Unity. Okay. So let's go back to that installation. So I'm choosing Visual Studio Code as an editor for GitHub. Next, or Git. Next. I'm going to say my selection is going to be use Git and optional Unix tools from the command prompt. I want that. I want it to be as close to a Unix-like experience as possible. Next. I'm going to use the OpenSSL library. Next. I'm going to check out Windows style, commit Unix style endings. Next. I'm going to use Windows as my default console window. Next. I'm going to have a default for my, when it comes to pulling, I'm going to use this default fast forward or merge. Okay, I'm not going to rebase. By the way, I got a question last time, what does rebase mean? It means that whenever I push, I'm going to move the head of my Git forward, or my commit forward, and rebase it every single time. I don't recommend this. Next. Git Credential Manager is a good option for you to keep your credentials inside of your machine so that you don't have to always log in. If you click this none, you'd always have to log in, and you wouldn't have credentials installed unless you want to do it manually. Next. Enable file system caching and enable symbolic links. I would recommend checking both of those. Next. And then do not, whatever you do not enable experimental support for sudo consoles. There's no need for this. Okay, and then install. So what it's going to do is it's going to install everything. I already had a version of Git installed locally on my command prompt, and what this is going to do is it's going to overwrite those files that I have physically in here. Notice where they're writing it: Git, user, share, and so on. Sometimes, even when I do this, I'm not going to check on view release notes. Sometimes when I do this, even after I've done that and I press command prompt, as an example, if I type in git -- version now, I get the latest version, 2.28.0.windows.1. However, even when you just did that installation, you may get an error, and you may get unrecognized command equivalent. And the reason for this is because everybody's Windows installation is slightly different. You may have got your Windows machine from Dell or some other vendor, Asus, MSI, Acer, whatever. A lot of these vendors come with some bloatware in addition to virus scanning software and stuff like that, and prevent you making changes to your operating system so easily. So the way to do that is two options. One, try rebooting your machine, but that's not going to help most of the time. The other way to do it is to actually go into the Windows button here and type in Advanced System Settings. If I just type in Advanced System Settings and I click this button up here, this link, it's going to bring up this dialog box for Advanced System Settings. And if I go into Environment Variables, it's going to show me my installation paths for all of my items. So if I click on Path, and if I double click or click Edit, then it's going to bring up all my installation paths, everything that's on my path variable as an example. And notice I have things like Node.js, and I have other things, MongoDB, because I'm running a mean stack course, as well as .NET tools. I have this one though. This is Git bin. So program files Git bin is where my Git installation is. If you don't have this listed, or if somehow you have a problem with unrecognized command, it can be fixed a lot of times by putting it in here. Sometimes we also have to do it inside of this path, the system variables in here. If you double click here, you'll see the system variables in here as well. And you may have to put them in here because this is the system variables and this is the user variables. This is for me, this is for everybody, right? So sometimes I put it in both places so that there's more compatibility and I have less problems. So now that I've done that and you've installed Git locally, we can go on to the next part of what we want to do. I'm just going to bring up command prompt now. So here's my command prompt. You should be able to get, at this point, git -- version, like we said, right, to give you this. If you can't do this yet, and there's something, so there might be some other problem, but that normally fixes the problems in most places. Git version 2.23 is totally good. You don't need to upgrade, Matthew, right? You don't have to do it if you didn't want to. If you wanted to, you can totally do it, and it'd be easy. You just saw me do it, and I had one version less, 2.27, and I still did it, and it's fine. Okay. So now that you've done this, this is great. Now we want to go and we want to kind of get into that folder we want to put up on GitHub. This one, GAME2014 F2020 Lab 1B. I want to go there. I can do that by typing in CD, which means change directory, space, and if I drag and drop my folder from my file system onto my command prompt, then what it does is it takes it and puts the path in there for where I need to go. And if I press enter, it's going to take me to that folder. So I'm actually physically pointing my command prompt now into that folder, which is what I want. Okay, let's open that folder up. And notice that there isn't a Git Ignore file in here. I need to add one in before I initialize my Git folder. Now remember, up online, I have an example of one that works that I got from Unity, this one, or from GitHub. I want to click raw. And in raw, I want to select everything here. So Control A, Control C to select and copy. You can also right click and press copy if you want. It's up to you. However you want to do it. In here, we need a new file, a new Git Ignore file. And the way to do that, there's a couple ways. You could use your favorite IDE to do that, or you can just right click in your folder and make a new text document. We can rename this .gitignore. It has to be named exactly that, .gitignore. Right? And then just get rid of the .text extension and press enter. It's going to ask you, do you want to change it? Yes, I do. And then there we are. We have our .gitignore. Now you can double click here and it'll open up your favorite editor or notepad. It doesn't matter which. It doesn't have to be a rich text editor. Just double click. It's going to ask you, where do you want to open it? Mine opens up in Visual Studio Code, but yours might ask you, which one do you want to use? And I'm just going to paste this in here. Control V. Right? And I actually pasted it in twice, I think. Undo. There we go. All right, so there we are. So then if I press Control S to save, now I have a Git Ignore file. And it is outfitted the exact same way that I found here up online. All right, so that's how I've done it. You can use Notepad for this as well. Close this off. Yay, I have a Git Ignore file, and you know that it's something that's in it because I have more than 0 kilobytes, all right, and from a size perspective. I can actually now delete my my GitHub package online. I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to go up to GitHub. And I'm going to go to our organization, George Brown. I have this test repo. And the way to delete repos is going to test, or whatever you called it. And I want to go into settings, and I want to delete it. I want to scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says danger zone, and I'm going to click delete this repository. Again, this is just a trick that I use if I want to get the latest version of the Git Ignore file that's offered up on GitHub. Now it says, I understand the consequences to delete this repository. It's going to delete it for me. It's going to ask me for my password, which I put in. We're good to go. And then what I can do is I can go back there, and now let's create the real one. So I want to go to George Brown, and I want to make a new repository. So new. I want to call this, again, it's going to be GAME2014-Fall 2020. You can call yours whatever you like. And then Lab 1B. That's what I want to call it. I'm not going to make it private. I'm going to make it public for you guys so you can see it. And I'm not going to include anything here. Okay? And then click Create Repository. What this is going to do is create a container for me up on GitHub that's empty. All right? And then I need to follow these steering instructions in one way or the other. Let's do that together. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my command prompt, and I'm inside the folder, I'm going to type in the keywords git init. That's my first command. Init initializes my my GitHub or almost like an invisible Git folder, .git folder. That's inside of my folder, my project folder. Enter. So that's the first thing it does. And to show you this, let's bring up our file explorer here. Here it is. Now you can see that there's a hidden .git folder, and I can see it because in view I have this hidden items checked. If I uncheck it, you can see now it doesn't appear, but if I check it again in view in my file explorer, I can see hidden items. Okay, this is where it is. So this is where all my references for Git and GitHub are going to be stored. Okay, so that's the first part. The next part is I'm going to follow the steering instructions, like I said. So I'm going to do a git add, but instead of adding a readme file, I'm going to add everything. So I'm going to say git add dot. Dot means add everything that's inside of my folder. Let's put that in. Enter. So that now I've created my first, I've collected everything, and I've kind of setting up something called the staging area, which is a temporary spot where I've had all the files that I've checkmarked of the ones that I want to put up on GitHub. You can specify individual files like this if you want, one at a time, and not include other ones. Here I'm including everything, but I'm using my Git Ignore file to ignore the files and folders that I've specified. Next, let's clear the screen. And CLS might be something that might work for you, not clear. In my case, it works because my command prompts have been enhanced. Okay, so if I do, the next part is git commit. Git commit -m. A commit is a fancy term for a snapshot of your current file structure. -m for message, and here's the message. I'm going to say initial commit. The two conventions are initial commit or first commit. That is the thing that you need to put in here. First commit or initial commit. I'm going to press enter. And it's going to add everything. It's going to basically add a name or a label to the snapshot that I just took when I did my first commit. So I make a snapshot and I label it. Mine is called initial commit. Okay. Now the next part, I'm just going to be lazy and copy these two things. I'm going to grab these two things. You can also type this out if you want. This right here is the URI, or the link between your local computer and Git Cloud. That's what it is, right? And you create a remote link. That's what it's called, a remote. And it has a name called origin. So origin means that it's pointing to this remote. This is the origin link, right? So this is the command, git remote add origin. I'm adding an origin remote, and it's going to be this thing, okay? And then I'm going to do a git push. Push is like upload. Git push -u for unconditional. Origin into across the origin remote, across this link, that's what it means, into the master branch. That's what this does. Notice I'm ignoring this one, okay? What this does right now is it makes the master branch the default branch, and we don't need to do this. All I need is just these last two lines of code. Copy. And if I go back and I right click, it pastes. And it already did my git remote. If you've never used GitHub before, and if I press the next enter, it's going to ask you to log in or even configure your desktop, right? But if you have, all you have to do is press enter. And then it should push things up to GitHub, like this. And then if I refresh my screen, you can see now online I have my a Git version of my project, my Unity project on GitHub. I'm just going to step back from this. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and I want to talk about this. Let's add a README file now. So now I'm doing something else. I'm saying, hey, let's add a README file on GitHub. Say, okay, so the README file is kind of a description of what my project's about. So something like demo project for GAME2014 lesson 2. Okay, let's just say, and we can put other details in here, like steering instructions on how to use the my project and so on, if I had a very complex project, or how to install stuff. But I'm not putting that in here. Think about this as a live wiki page. All right, here when I add a file, I need to make a commit. So this is my default commit message, created or create readme.md. I'm going to just click commit new file. So now I have a new commit, and I have a problem. I've created a problem for myself. Why? Because up online I have 2 commits, and locally on my computer I only have 1. So I have to synchronize myself locally with the files that I have remotely. And to do that, if I've added a file remotely or somebody else, I'm working with somebody else, I have to pull first before I make any changes. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to type in, let's clear the screen again just so you can see it, git pull. And if I press enter, it's going to download that readme.md file that I just made up online. If I didn't do this and I started developing on Unity, I would be out of sync, and then trying to push up to GitHub would be impossible. It would say, man, I'm sorry, but your repository that's local is different. It's not synced up with the repository that's on GitHub Cloud. You have to either merge or save or do something or stash your changes, and we don't want to do all those things. It's just better just to pull before we do any development, in our case. Cool, so I've got this. Let's take a look at what my folder looks like. So if I look at my folder now, I have a README file. There it is. I pulled it down from GitHub. I made it here, pulled it back. Now you may have seen this demo in the past, but I want to talk about a couple things here. I don't need, for Unity, this is the nuance I was talking about before. I do not need my library folder in order for me to use Unity. I don't need it. If I delete this thing, first of all, let's see how big this is as it is. If I looked at my lab 1B the way it is, remember I made a build last week and I downloaded one asset, which was the device manager from the package, right? If I go here and I go properties, you're going to see that my files currently sit at 237 megabytes and it doesn't do anything. My project is literally a dot that's on the screen for Android. It literally does not do anything. This is a waste of space, my friends. We don't care about this stuff. If you're going to zip this up and give it to me on GitHub, the best thing to do, or on Blackboard, go in here, delete your library folder. All right, delete it. I want you to see how much you save. All right, so just deleting your library folder deletes a large portion of your the size of your project. Okay, a huge portion. If I go back out in there and I do a properties now, let's run that property thing again. Yeah, this happens sometimes where my computer does not like what I just did because I'm running OneDrive. But if I actually did this, you see that my it's actually reduced in size a great deal. Okay, this is bad because now bad things will happen to me. I'm just going to run this file, and you're going to see that even though I stopped it, if I run lab 1B, I'm still going to be able to do that. It's not going to be a problem. I'm still going to regenerate my files. It's going to resolve my packages. It's going to download stuff into my folders. And it's going to be just fine, okay? When you delete files from the folder gets way smaller. In fact, it goes from 256 megabytes on the machine to something like 38 megabytes on the machine cat, right? And if I delete my builds folder, it goes from, as an example, 18 or something like 18 or 38 megabytes in my builds folder. And my whole package becomes, and I'm not joking around, under 100 kilobytes. 100 kilobytes, like 0.1 megs. All right, that's what I'm talking about. That's why we have to delete our, and you can see that unfortunately my Explorer has stopped responding. It's a bug that I have with Windows 10 Pro, which is okay. If I just reboot my system, it'll be back. But, and also because I'm doing so many things. So ignore this. But the idea is that now I'm launching Unity and I'm back, right? I don't need to look at this. And if I was to run a new folder, I don't think File Explorer is still broken, but hey, let's just try it anyway, right? And you can see, yeah, this is just taking its time to try and figure things out. But if I go to my desktop and if I look at GAME2014, then you can see here that now inside my lab 1, guess what? My library's back. It's been regenerated. I'm okay with that, right? But if I was to actually look at my builds folder, and I can't, you can see that it's taking its sweet time doing this kind of stuff as it's re-indexing is what is happening. I'm also connected to OneDrive, which is also part of the problem. But if I was to look at this, my builds folder itself is another folder I can get rid of before I zip things up to give it to me, guys. Please do not give me a zip archive that includes library or builds. Don't. Get rid of these two things before you zip archive everything. Okay, and I can't show you this now because I've got this funky error. All right, but what about this? How about what's happening now with my project on Unity? So if I go to build settings, one of the side effects of removing your library is what happens is sometimes your platform is missing. So right now it's pointing at my PC, Mac, and Linux standalone build. I don't want this. I need to, if I've deleted my library folder, I need to go back to an Android or iOS build. Let's go back to Android and then switch platforms. You need to do this in order for Unity to rejig your textures and everything else so it's compatible with mobile. Okay? And once we've done this part, we're back, actually. As soon as we've done this, we're back to normal, and your library file is back to where it was. Okay? One thing to note is on the command line, we're going to see that there's an additional, if I just did a git status right now, you can see that my branch is up to date and nothing has changed. Why? My Git Ignore file, my friends, is ignoring library and .vs and a bunch of other garbage files. So all the meta files that I have going on right now are being ignored. But I highly recommend to you, right, when you're doing things with GitHub, before you put things back up online, take Unity down, all right? Because what happens is Unity also holds or locks meta files and a bunch of other things that can prevent the proper upload of all your files up online. Please don't do this. Shut Unity down. It's just a safer choice, okay? But for now, you can see that if I run, I still run in my little device simulator. It's right here. If there's a problem with this, for example, if I expected something to be here, if my scene got messed up, as an example, so here's my main scene. I may have not saved my scene last time, right, as an example, which is what probably happened. Not because my scene is empty, but there's nothing in here, right? And I can add my textures to the scene and do everything that I did last time as before. But one thing that I want to do is if I want a texture to appear here, so I would say right-click inside my Unity. Notice that I'm saying untitled. Sometimes what it is it's there, but I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let's go into my scenes and go to main. Again, it doesn't know where to look. So there is my texture. There's my handle that I have in here. Okay? You can see that that's the case. So if I save now, Control S or File and Save, I save my scene. And if I File and Save Project, I save my project too. If I run it again, you're going to see now that it's going to have my little handle appear on my screen. No problem. Great. Now that I've done this, if I make any changes to Unity, as an example, I have to shut down Unity. So let's say, for example, I add something else. I duplicate my handle. So Control D duplicates my handle and creates another one, right? And let's say, for example, I want to use the W key to move my handle somewhere else. I got two of them for whatever reason, okay? And maybe we'll call this, just for completeness, we'll call this handle 2 or something like that. Doesn't do anything right now, but we will do stuff when we hit touch. If I press save, Control S to save, now I've made a change to my files. And if I want to put this up on GitHub, my recommendation to you is File, Exit. Close Unity, guys. It's super important because it unlocks certain things. It takes away the temporary folder and a bunch of other stuff, and you don't know the side effects it can have. Over the years, when I've shut down Unity, I find better success or more success by doing that than keeping Unity open and trying to push to GitHub. Let's do that. So if I say git add dot, right, as an example, this is the first part. It says warning. It gives me a warning about the scenes. It doesn't matter. It's actually updating the main Unity scene. That's the only thing that I've changed so far, right? And then I'm going to clear the screen. Git commit -m, and then what feature I've added or changed. Added another handle, right, to the main scene, and press enter. And then now that I have that, that's my second commit, or third because of my Git Readme file. And then I'm going to say git push, and I can also specify a cross which remote, but I know which one I have. I have an origin remote into the master branch. I could do this, or I can just type in git push and press enter. And if you've never done this before, it's going to ask you to log in. If you have, it's just going to push it up to GitHub just as is. And now I'm up to date again. And if I go back up to GitHub and if I refresh, you're going to see that I have 3 commits. And you can look at those commits by clicking on there. Initial commit, I created my Readme file from GitHub, and then I added another handle. That's the third commit that I made. And one thing to note is this. If I click on any of these little links here on GitHub, so if I click on this, it's going to do a diff, right? And what a diff is it's going to create a almost like a little micro change log, right, between one thing and the other. Let's just actually refresh because my browser seems to be somewhat affected by what I'm doing. Actually, it's my uBlock origin stopping that from happening. But you can see that if I click here, that here is what's happening here. Okay, so green means add. That's what green means. And red means remove. So if I was going to remove something, you can see that here what's happened is this is what the main.unity scene looks like on the back end, where I've actually added components to the main Unity scene. Okay, that's what's happened, right? So the green means add. And if I was to remove a component, then we'd have a green area and then a red area. Red would be remove, right? Or take away. So this is diff. This is almost like a diff between one thing and the other. Diff means difference. Okay. Let's go back. We can also look at a particular commit. So if I look here in your history, I can look at any one of these points in times. Let's say before I added another handle. Let's click there. And it'll show you the project before I pushed with my new commit. All right. You can see that this is what it looks like. And I can download my code from here, from this project itself, from this commit, actually. And notice that this is where I'm at. This is the commit. Because normally this isn't here. This should point to the master branch. And the master branch has all my commits. Okay. So that's kind of the way GitHub works with Unity. And hopefully that was useful to you because it's going to save you a pile of headache. I know that when my group was developing with Unity so many times, and we had to figure this out, that library is a bad folder to have inside of your Unity to push to GitHub. It takes a long time, so hundreds of megabytes, and that's just for me doing nothing. If you download 3 assets, this thing can balloon to like over a gigabyte. Pushing a gigabyte of data to GitHub is not the smartest thing to do. All right, as well as builds. Sometimes if you have a builds folder, there might be some larger files in the builds folder that actually will stop your GitHub push altogether. It won't even allow you to push to GitHub, right? Because of how big those files are, right? Even if you have large file support. All right, so that is what I need to do for my Git and GitHub. I'm just going to tear down these. If I close this down, I'm going to have a really weird problem. It's going to say because of my, it's going to rejig my my file and folders, and the problem won't go away until I reboot. That's just the way it works, unfortunately. And it's not a big deal for me, but it may be something that's concerning for you. If you see something like this, don't panic. Just reboot your system. It's not something that I'm afraid of or that hasn't happened before. But one thing it'll stop me from doing is right-clicking at all. So if I was to do something like right-click, it's going to spin forever. That's just what happens, right? So don't worry about this, but rest assured that notice that my other lab, I did the exact same thing in the other lab when I zipped it up, and notice I went down to 86K. So this is like way smaller than what my project looks like right now, which is like 256 megabytes. All right, that's it for my lab. So remember that one thing to note is that your, from a requirement perspective, if I go back to assignments, that your Unity and GitHub lab, which is worth a portion of your marks, is due this Friday at midnight. So lots of time to do it. All I'm looking for is that you know how to push to GitHub. You can use any tool in your toolbox that you like to do this. You can use Sourcetree. I'll pull this up. For those people who don't know what this is, Sourcetree is a very common user interface. I know that Joss, my friend, he likes to use Sourcetree. So if you like to use this, it's a free client for Windows and Mac, go ahead. All right. The other one that I like a lot is GitKraken. Right? GitKraken is a little bit more user-friendly, user interface friendly than Sourcetree. It has also other things included. It's free to download GitKraken. As an example, if you get, there's a professional version of this. If you get the GitHub Education Pack, like I talked about before, if you go to Education GitHub, there's actually a GitHub Education Pack that includes a ton of resources for you guys. GitHub Student Pack. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again because they keep on adding to this stuff. So look at all these crazy offers. Things like a free domain name, space with DigitalOcean. You can use the student plan with Unity. You can have credits with Microsoft Azure, which is another cloud provider. You can get credits with Heroku, and GitHub. You can also get the pro version of GitHub that includes something called Glowboards, right? Very nicely, can be used for project management. So really cool stuff, and way more stuff if you continue to scroll. There's a ton of free resources for students that's here, and I highly recommend you go here and grab your GitHub education pack. You can't go wrong. Okay, tons and tons of stuff here, and they keep on adding to this every single year. I keep being amazed at the offerings here for spending literally zero money. Okay, so really, really cool. Okay. All right, so that is, oh yeah, I should also mention GitHub Desktop. GitHub Desktop. Actually, you can get to it by desktop.github.com is where it is. So GitHub Desktop is both Windows and Mac. It's not as pretty as GitKraken or even Sourcetree, but it does the job, right? And it's made by GitHub for GitHub, so it's pretty good. All right, questions around the stuff that we talked about for this Git fork. I have another one. Let's see, Git fork. This is another one. Oh, that looks really nice. Thank you, Kat and David. That's awesome, right? This looks pretty sexy too, right? Michael, go ahead. You had a question.
Does Git Ignore to work? Does it have to be within a certain folder level?
Yep. It has to be in the root folder of your Unity project. So it's got to be on the same level as your library file folder. Same level.
Oh.
Can't be inside or anything like that, or else it won't work.
Because I made the repository and then I dragged in my my project into it, and then Git Ignore was like outside of the directory.
Yeah, no. Yeah, then it's not going to work. Yeah, it has to be before you develop. That's why I remember how the process that I did. At first I had the Git Ignore file, and then I went to my folder, and then I put a Git Ignore file in there, and then I initialized GitHub. If you don't do that, or Git, if you don't do that, then what happens is Git doesn't know about the Git Ignore file, and when you push to GitHub, by the way, there's other ways to do this too, but if you push to GitHub, then it won't know. It would just ignore your Git Ignore file. That's what's going to happen.
I was using it through GitHub Desktop, and I was trying to create the existing project as a GitHub file.
Yeah, I know. That's why
it wasn't letting me do it that well.
Michael, come to the dark side and use command line. All right, you have more control, my friend. Okay, my brother, more control. And the great thing about that is, yes, it's command line, and and people are a little bit uncomfortable with it, but it's way more control than if you use any kind of user interface. The great thing is there's some great user interfaces out there. Look, this one seems to even have a console, right, which is connected to it. That's great. Thank you for this, guys. I'll definitely suggest this to other students. I'll try this out myself and see how it works. I haven't used this one. And again, because I am a console person, so I don't need typically this stuff. One thing also, though, I have to be honest and tell you is when it comes to merging and when it comes to branching, I think that using a tool like this is great because it helps you merge, right? So whether you're using this or Tortoisekit, if you really want kind of a minimal thing to help you with your Git and GitHub, download Tortoisekit. So Tortoisekit is actually a shell extension. So it adds on to your file explorer and allows you to do things like right-click onto a folder, and then you can do some simple commands like I want to merge, or I want to resolve merge problems or conflicts or whatever, and it'll do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, because one of the biggest problems with Git and GitHub is merging, right? Which is a big problem. Yeah, Blame is awesome.
For the lab, is it okay to submit it where we have a repository and then we just have the folder with everything in it?
Yep. Like, for example, what you should see is this. This is what you should.
So all the assets, package, product settings, user things are all in a folder there in the main repository.
That's what I want, like this. This is what your folder will look like. Because then when I download it, Michael, right, I'll get all this, right? Which is what I need. I can't run Unity without this stuff, right? So I need to I have to be able to go to your folder and double click inside of your. A quick way to access this, and hopefully this will work with my broken file explorer right now, But if I go to desktop and if I go to my files, let's say go to 1B, and if I want to just make it work, just like we do with Visual Studio 2019 or 2017, you don't want to double click on the solution file. That won't work. You've got to go into assets, you got to go into scenes, and if you double click on the Unity scene, the main Unity scene like this, it'll actually bring up the associated project, which is Unity, which is a great thing. So this is the way to do it. Okay. Can I check yours? And we'll all know. Sure. Can you give me your link to yours right now here on chat, and I'll let you know. Thank you. This is Cats, right? So it looks pretty good, Cat. I love your username. That's great. Assets, packages, projects. Let's download it and see if it works. So I'm going to give you, this is a great example. Thank you so much for this, Cat. This is fantastic. Let's try this out. So I'm going to download this and put it up. I'll download it to my downloads folder. Notice my downloads folder says Cat's files are 25 kilobytes. That's like super small, guys. That's amazing. And I would just unzip it here. So I'm going to unzip it in the same folder right here. And then if everything goes well, if I go into assets folder and into scenes and into sample scene.unity, if I double click, then we should be able to run my default thing. Now, here's the thing. Cat has a different version of Unity than I do. And there's two things. One, it says your project was last saved with a different version of Unity. Do I want to use this version? I'm one version behind you. It says it doesn't match. This may require a re-import. I'm okay with that. Just continue. Right? Because there's just one version different. It's not going to be a big deal, typically. All right? If it is a big deal, I mean, the great thing is I have Cat stuff up on GitHub. I can always download and install another version of Unity if I want to, and then be compatible with Cat, and then re-download her project, which is what I normally would do. Okay. But what it's doing here is it's recreating her library folder anyway, right? Because I don't have her library folder. It's not up on GitHub, so it looks to be working fine, and we'll see if this is all working perfectly in a second. But this is great. This is a great example of how it would normally work, and I'm pretty confident, Cat, it's going to be okay. Yes, Michael.
Picture in the chat.
Let me see.
Folder structure. Is that how you want it to be?
Just a moment.
Is that okay?
Just a moment. I can't see the picture in chat because it doesn't give me a picture. Let me go to. It just gives me a PNG. Let me just check Cat stuff first, and we'll go from there. Okay, so here's the simulator. She did the same thing I did. And notice again, if I go to build settings, her build settings are wrong. I would go to Android and set up a Cat. It looks great. I'm not going to try it, but it looks great. Thank you. This is exactly what I was looking for. Okay. But let's do what Michael's saying. Michael's saying he wants me to take a look at that. And let's see
I don't know
what.
if you're able to open the picture there or not.
Yeah, I can't. I have to actually go in here and take a look and see if what you're talking about. So let's go into downloads, and I just downloaded your picture. Come on, downloads. It's not going to work for me. Sorry, guys. I have a real issue with my machines right now, where I have these really weird things. So here's your capture, Michael. And that's what you've committed?
I have it in a folder.
Yeah, I know.
Or it's the other structure.
Yeah, no, this won't work.
That won't work?
No. Well, it will work, but what I have to do is I have to actually go into this folder afterwards as well. And even though this will work out here, you also have a Git attributes file.
Git Ignore in there.
Yeah, you have to put this inside. Yeah, I know, but what you should have is just this folder. You don't need both, right? Because you have a containing folder, and inside that folder you have another folder, and that's where everything is inside there. So my recommendation to you is don't do it that way. For now, I mean, totally, it's usable. It's not like this is terrible, but I shouldn't have to go into another folder, and especially when you pass this on, you shouldn't have to go into another folder to get to your files. You can just put the Git Ignore file inside there. Okay. So, but that's, I wouldn't dock you. It wouldn't be like 100% correct, but at least you've put things up and you have a Git Ignore file. And if I downloaded your stuff, it'd probably be okay, just like Cat's. Okay. All right, guys, that's really all that I have for today. I really wanted to focus on this part because it's super important when we share files together that things are done right. The problem is that when we share stuff with Unity, the assumption is that I can just put things up and I include my library file and I include everything, and then I'm downloading, guys, gigs of data. I'm telling you right now, for your assignment number 1 and going forward, I'm not going to do it. If I see a file that's on your Blackboard and your zip file is something insane, like, I don't know, 500 megabytes, I'm going to send you a note that says, thank you so much for your submission. I'll use my name, Tom, but you need to resubmit this because your file is too big. Okay? So please don't do that, and it'll save everyone time. That's it. Hopefully this little tutorial helped, because I wanted to show you how to do this. And next week, what I was hoping to do this week is talk more, but that's all I showed the first class. I don't want to go into more detail with you guys. One thing that would be nice to show everybody is Unity Colab, which is what I usually use for collaborating with teams. But next week when we do our user interface demo, we'll do it then. Okay? And I'll let you guys go just a little bit early. Guys, thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming out and attending today and giving me your feedback. Big thanks to Kat and Russ and Michael and David and all the people that really give me feedback. Kevin too, and I'll talk to you guys next week. If you have any questions, please DM me on Discord or send me an email. All right, I'm going to stop recording now, guys, and I'll stick around if you have any other questions.